Shabbat Shalom, O House of Israel. This is your brother Ben Sedek Ben Torah, and today we're going to look at another controversial topic known as tongues. What really happened on the day of Shavuot, Pentecost, mentioned in Acts 2. We're going to read it, some of it, and then comment upon it. It starts at Acts chapter 2, verse 1. It said, and when the day of the festival of Shavuot, or Pentecost, had come, they were all with one mind in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from the Shemaim, or the heaven, as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them divided tongues as of fire, and settled on each one of them. And they were all filled with the set apart Spirit, or the Ruach HaKodesh, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Ruach, the Spirit, gave them to speak. Now in Jerusalem, there were dwelling Yahudim, dedicated men from every nation under the heaven. And when this sound came to be, the crowd came together and were confused, because everyone heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying to each other, look, are not all these who speak Galileans? And how do we hear, each one in our own language in which we were born? Parthians and Medes and Elamites and those dwelling in Aram Naharaim, both Yahudim and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, both Phrygia and Pamphylia, Mitzrayim, which is Egypt, and parts of Libya around Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Yahudim, Israelites, and converts, Cretans and Arabs. We have them speaking in our own tongues the great deeds of Elohim. And they were all amazed and were puzzled, saying to each other, what does this mean? And others mocking them said, they have been filled with sweet wine. But Kepha, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said to them, men of Yahudim, men of Israel, men of Yehuda, and all those dwelling in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and listen closely to my words. For these men are not drunk, as you imagine, since it is only the third hour of the day. But this is what was spoken by the prophet Yoel. And it shall be in the last days, says Elohim, the Almighty One, that I shall pour out my Ruach, my Spirit, on all flesh. And your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And also on my man servants and my woman servants I shall pour out my Ruach in those days, and they shall prophesy. And I shall show wonders in the Shemaim, the heavens above, and the signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and splendid, some manuscripts said, terrible day of Yah. And it shall be that everyone who calls on the name of Yah shall be saved. Hallelujah. Now what was going on here in Acts 2? Let's go back to the Torah, the instruction, Vayikra, Leviticus 23. One of the Mohedim, the appointments, which people erroneously call feast, was the feast of Shavuot. The word Shavuot is plural in Hebrew, it means weeks, plural. Shavuot means count sevens. So 7, 7, 49, so weeks. The Greeks call it Pentecost. Pente means 5 and Kos means count. It means count 50, right? So Pentecost means count 50. 50, count 50, Pentecost. What happened was this. They always observe the feast based upon the scriptures in Deuteronomy 16:16. Is one of the pilgrimage feasts in which the children of Israel have to go to Jerusalem, to keep the feast. The other two was unleavened bread, which the Passover was part, and then the next one is tabernacle. All these three Mohedim appointments must be kept in Jerusalem. So what happened in Acts 2? They were observing the feast of Shavuot, Pentecost, and Yahushua told them early on that they should not leave that feast until the Ruach HaKodesh, the pouring out of the Ruach, the Spirit upon them. So what happened while they were there, based upon the commandment, Deuteronomy 16:16, all Israelites from all over the world who were going to celebrate, observe this Mohedim, known as Shavuot, Pentecost, they have to travel. That's why it's called a pilgrimage Mohedim, or a pilgrimage feast. They have to travel to Jerusalem. So This include proselyte. Proselytes are people when they're not born Israelites, but they are converted and joined to the people of Israel. So they travel to Jerusalem. Now what happened, as we see in Acts 2, verse 9 to 11, we see different nations represented here. People from Mitzrayim, which is Egypt, people from Persia, um, Cappadocia, all over the world. So they speak different languages. What happened, these were just Israelites who obviously didn't believe in Yahushua. They didn't know about Yahushua. So what Yahushua was doing in Acts 2, his Talmudim, his students, his disciples, they were Galilean and they spoke Aramaic. Aramaic, it was the language of the day. That's well established. That's a lesson for another time. They spoke Aramaic. So what happened was this. Well, a few of them could speak other languages too, but they were predominantly Aramaic speakers. Now what happened, these people from different nations were coming there to observe the Mohidim. Yahushua wanted them to hear the good news. But how can they hear the good news if they don't speak Aramaic or they speak different languages and they will not be able to understand the dialect of the Israelites who were living in the land of Canaan or Galilee? What happened was this: He supernaturally poured out the Ruach HaKodesh, the set apart spirit, upon them, so that each one of the Talmudim or the disciples who were there testifying about Yahushua, the people from these different countries, they could hear the good news in their own native language. In other words, if somebody was from, the people who were there from Egypt, who spoke the Egyptian dialect, what Yahushua did, he have the Talmudim, some of them speak in the Egyptian dialect, so those people from Egypt could hear in their own native tongue about Yahushua. People who were from Persia who speak a different language, one of the Talmudim or disciples will be speaking about Yahushua in the Persian language, so those people in Persia could understand, and so forth and so on. Common sense. That's why these people, all these foreigners, some of them proselytes, some of those are Israelite, but they speak different language. They were shocked. They're like, how are these men, Galilean, speaking Aramaic, speaking our languages, and they were not trained in our language? An indication of this is in verse Acts 2 verse 6. And when this sound came to be, the crowd came together and were confused because everyone heard them speak in his own language. The people, the crowds who were there, they were from different countries, they have different language, but they heard the Talmudim, the disciples, speaking to them in the people's different languages. So they're wondering, how can this be? These men are Galilean. They're not trained in our language. How could they speak to us in our language? What happened, because there were so many different nations represented there, there were different languages being spoken by the Talmudim, the disciples. So people were hearing, it sounded like a confusion. All these men speaking at the same time and speaking in different languages. The word tongue came from the Aramaic Hebrew word lashon, and it means language or tongue. So tongue just means language. Now, what happened is just common sense. The only way the people from foreign lands could understand, they have to hear the language spoken in their native tongue from the country that they came from. If we turn also to 1 Corinthians chapter 14, that's time we can't do the whole thing, but I'm just going to go through some verses. You could read this in your own time with the Ruach HaKodesh, the set apart spirit, and some common sense. That's all it takes. In Acts 14, Shaul or Paul was saying, pursue love and earnestly seek the spiritual gifts, but rather that you prophesy. For he who is speaking in a tongue or a language does not speak to Elohim, for no one understands, but in the Ruach, the Spirit, he speaks secret. But he who is prophesying speak upbuilding and encouraging and comfort to men. What Shaul is saying here is not like what many church people teach, that he's speaking some kind of gibberish. No. What he's saying here is this. There, at the time of Corinthian, there were many people who have gifts, different gifts, who could speak different languages. Many of them could speak different languages. So what happened when they meet together in the assemblies, what they were doing, sometimes they'll be just showing off their gifts of speaking different language, and the assembly will not be edified. For example, if I go into a congregation who only speak English, and I go there and I start speaking Aramaic, How will that edify the people? Nothing. The people don't understand what I'm saying, and therefore they will be lost. There will be no edification. However, if there's somebody there who speak Aramaic and English and could interpret, then the people will understand my tongue. Just common sense. Now what he was saying, verse 2, for he who is speaking in a tongue or a language does not speak to men but to Elohim, for no one understand, but in the Ruach he speaks secret. What that means is, if I go into an assembly and I'm praying to the Father, and I'm praying, say I'm praying in Aramaic, and the people are not familiar with Aramaic. To the people who are listening to me, it's a mystery. Mystery means something which is not revealed or not understand. It's a mystery to the people who are listening. But to the Almighty, it is not a mystery. Why? Because I'm speaking to Him. The Almighty could understand any language because He gave men languages. So I'm speaking mystery, while to the Almighty, it's no mystery, but to the people it's a secret. But he who is prophesying, verse 3, speaks upbuilding and encouragement and comfort. What is prophesying? Prophesying just means you comfort somebody with a word. You speak divinely to them. You uplift them. That's what prophesying is. In verse 4, it says, he who is speaking in a tongue or a language builds up himself, but he who is prophesying builds up the assembly. So if somebody comes into the assembly and they're just speaking their foreign language to themselves, of course they could be uplifting themselves, but guess what? They're not uplifting the assembly because the assembly doesn't understand what they're saying. Verse 5, now I wish you all spoke with tongues, but rather that you might prophesy. But for he who is prophesying is greater than he who is speaking with tongues, unless he interprets so that the assembly might receive upbuilding. Once again, same thing. He said, wish many of you could speak many languages, because it's a gift to speak many languages. However, he says better that you prophesy, meaning you could uplift or encourage each other. That's what he's saying right there. Let's jump down to verse 22. He said, so then tongues are for a sign, not to those who believe, but to unbelievers. And prophesying is not for unbelievers, but for those who believe. Very simple. Tongues is a sign for non-believers. Why? Because in the day of Pentecost, most of the people who came to celebrate the feast, they were non-believers. So the Talmudim, or the disciple, they had to have the gift of tongues so they can prophesy to these unbelievers. Now prophesying is for believers. Why? Because we as believers, we study the prophecy to understand what's the Almighty's plan is for us in our lives and what's going to happen next. A person who doesn't believe, prophecy doesn't mean anything to them. Only for those who believe. Okay? Very simple. And then let's look at one more verse. All right. Verse 23. If then all the assembly come together in one place and all speak with tongues, and there came in those who are unlearned or unbelievers, well, shall they not say that you are mad? What he's saying is common sense. If you walk into an assembly and you hear people speaking, everybody speaking a different language at the same time, and nobody know what each other is saying, and you walk in and hear that mumbo jump, you're gonna think these people are crazy, and rightly so, because tongues are languages, and the gift of it was to witness to unbelievers in their native tongue. I mean, time permits me from going more into this. I might do another part, a part 2 later on, but do your own research. A lot of it is just common sense. Just think up with common sense. Going into an assembly, speaking a language to the people who doesn't understand what you're saying, and see how far that will go without an interpreter. Until then, Shabbat Shalom.